Listen. This story began in 1858. At the back gate of Stonefield Manor, 5 people were waiting at that gate, all newly hired servants, all with their hands folded in front of them, all looking down, all except one. Rose Merton had lifted her head. She was looking at the manor, calmly, steadily, as if she had seen this building before. Because she had. She had seen houses like this. She had grown up in houses like this. But no one knew that. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Cole, stepped outside. She was an older woman with gray hair and the kind of eyes that noticed everything. She looked at Rose. "You," she said. "Have you worked as a maid before?" Rose answered, "No." Mrs. Cole frowned. "Then why are you standing like that?" "Like what?" "Not like a servant." A brief silence. "I can fix that," Rose said. Mrs. Cole looked at her for another moment. Then she turned away. "Come inside. Now let me tell you about Rose. Her real name was Rose Ashdale." The Ashdale family had once been one of the old families of London. A large house, wide lands, a respected name in society. But her father had been in debt. For years he had borrowed money. And when he died, he left nothing behind. No money, no house, no land. Only debt. Rose had been 18 at the time. Her mother was already gone. She had no brother, no close relatives. 2 things were left to her. A small silver brooch from her father, and the Ashdale name. But carrying that name was no longer a source of pride. It was a burden. The Ashdale name had become associated with debt, with a fallen family. So she changed it. Rose Merton. No one knew. No one had asked. They went inside, and Rose hesitated. She saw the corridor, long, high-ceilinged, with large paintings on the walls. Warmth spread from the fireplace. A chandelier shone above. It felt familiar. Everything felt familiar. As a child, she had run through corridors like this, climbed staircases like these, sat in rooms like these. Now she was a servant in one. She swallowed. Her face did not change. She kept walking. Mrs. Cole showed them the rooms and explained the rules. Wake at 5 in the morning. Work until 10 at night. Half a day off on Sunday afternoon. Rose listened. She remembered everything. The other servants asked questions. Rose did not. Mrs. Cole looked at her again, with that strange look, but she said nothing. That afternoon, Rose began her first task, cleaning the great hall. It was a large room, sofas, paintings, and a piano in the corner. Rose took the cloth and started working. As she cleaned, she looked around. The paintings showed the ancestors of the Vey family. Generation after generation, the same posture, the same expressions. The faces of people who had always been wealthy, powerful, and certain of their place in the world. Rose stopped in front of one painting. A young man, dark eyes, straight posture. The name beneath it read, Edward Vey, 1821. The Duke's grandfather, most likely. Rose continued cleaning. It was 4 o'clock. The door opened. Rose turned. A man walked in. He looked to be in his 30s, tall, dressed in dark clothing. Papers were in his hand, and he was reading them. He did not see Rose, or perhaps he simply ignored her. He crossed the room, went to the table in the corner, placed the papers down, and wrote a few notes. Rose held the cloth and waited. The man kept reading. Rose studied him quietly. His face was stern, but not cruel. He looked tired. There was a weight on his shoulders. Charles Vey, the Duke of Stonefield. Was this him? The man gathered his papers, stood up, walked toward the door. As he passed, he did not look at Rose. The door closed. Rose turned back to her cloth and continued cleaning. That evening, the servants' quarters were full. The women were talking about the manor, the work, the Duke. Rose sat quietly in the corner, listening. "The Duke is very quiet," one of them said, "but he's not bad. At least he doesn't shout." "Lady Sylvia is coming this week," another said, lowering her voice. "His former fiancée. Be careful when she arrives." "Why?" "Because when she comes, the whole house changes. Her ladyship comes with her too, and the two of them together." She stopped. "Well, you'll see." Rose listened and remembered. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. Late that night, everyone went to sleep. Rose did not. She lay on her bed and looked at the ceiling. Thick wooden beams stretched across it. Old, solid, centuries old. She took the brooch from her pocket. Small, silver, engraved around the edges. It had belonged to her grandmother, the symbol of the Ashdale family. She held it in her palm. It was cold at first. Then it warmed. Rose closed her eyes. "Your name is Rose Merton," she told herself. "Remember that. You came here for work, for money, nothing else." She held the brooch tightly. But one day, she thought, only thought it. She did not say it aloud. "One day you will leave this house differently." How? She did not know. When? She did not know. But the feeling was there, in her bones, in her blood, in Ashdale blood. She closed her eyes. Stonefield Manor was silent, and Rose slept. Lady Sylvia Croft arrived on Friday morning, and the manor changed. Rose could feel it. It was not something you could touch. It was in the air. The servants walked faster. Mrs. Cole spoke more sharply. The kitchen was louder. Rose asked someone, "Who is coming?" The woman looked at her. "Lady Sylvia, and her ladyship." "Who is her ladyship?" "The Duke's mother, Lady Margaret." She paused. "When those two arrive together, just do your work. Don't be seen. Don't speak." Rose lowered her head. "Don't be seen. Don't speak." All right. The carriage arrived before noon. Rose was preparing the great hall. Flowers, velvet cloths, silver trays. Mrs. Cole had checked everything twice. The door opened. Lady Margaret entered first. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and a straight posture. Her eyes swept across the manor as if inspecting it, claiming it. She did not look at the servants. She never did. In her world, servants were not people. They were objects. Lady Sylvia entered behind her. Rose paused. Sylvia was beautiful. Strikingly beautiful. Blonde hair, green eyes, every movement calculated. When she walked into the room, the atmosphere shifted. Everyone noticed. Sylvia noticed the Duke as well. He was standing across the room. She smiled. A special smile, meant only for him, only for that moment. The Duke inclined his head politely, but coldly. Rose saw that, and she understood something. This woman wanted the Duke back, and she was determined to wed him. The first hour passed quietly. The guests settled in the hall. Tea was served. Conversations began. Rose and the other servants moved back and forth. Plates, cups, small tasks. As Rose passed with a tray, she heard Sylvia's voice. "Wait a moment." Rose turned. Sylvia was looking at her. Slowly, carefully, the way someone might examine a horse at a market. "You're new?" Sylvia said. "Yes, ma'am." "Your name?" "Rose, ma'am." Sylvia smiled. That calculated smile. "Rose, she repeated, as if tasting the name. Where are you from? London, ma'am. Which part of London? Rose paused. The East, ma'am. Sylvia raised an eyebrow. The East. She turned to the woman beside her, someone from society who was barely holding back a laugh. They hire servants from East London now. Then she turned back to Rose. Show me your hands. Rose waited 1 second. She shifted the tray to her left hand and held out her right. Sylvia looked. Soft, she said. Very soft for a servant's hands. She lifted her head. What did you do before this? Housework, ma'am. In which house? Different houses. Sylvia's smile did not change, but her eyes did. Interesting, she said. Then she turned away and continued her conversation. It looked finished, but it wasn't. Rose turned back to the tray and walked on. Her heart was not racing. Her hands were not shaking. But something inside her was burning, warm, quiet, controlled. Show me your hands. Soft. Sylvia had done it on purpose. It looked like the sort of thing done to a servant. But it wasn't. It was a message. I saw you. I measured you. You are different, and that is dangerous. Rose understood. The second scene came that afternoon, this time in the corridor. Rose was carrying sheets. Sylvia was coming from the opposite direction. She was alone. They met in the corridor. Sylvia stopped. Rose stepped aside to let her pass. But Sylvia didn't pass. Rose, she said quietly. No one else could hear. Let me tell you something. Rose waited. I have been in this manor for a long time. I have known the Duke for a long time. She took 1 step closer. Servants here come and go, but I don't. She paused. Do you understand what I mean? Rose looked at her, straight, calm, giving nothing away. I understand, ma'am, she said. You mean you do your job very well. Sylvia froze. For 1 second, just one, that carefully controlled expression broke. Then she recovered. She smiled and walked past. Rose continued carrying her sheets. 2 people had seen that scene. One was Lady Margaret. She had watched from the corner. She had seen Sylvia freeze. She had seen Rose's calm, steady gaze. When Sylvia came near her, Margaret leaned forward and whispered in her ear, Watch that girl. Sylvia's eyes followed Rose down the corridor. She's only a servant, Sylvia said. No, Margaret replied flatly. She isn't. The second person was Charles Vay. He had been standing at the top of the stairs, looking down. He had seen the short exchange in the corridor. Sylvia stopping, Rose answering, Sylvia freezing. Most servants lowered their heads around Sylvia. They apologized. They hurried away. This woman had looked straight at her. Charles turned and went back to his room, but the look stayed in his mind. Dinner that evening was long. Rose was serving. Plates, glasses, moving back and forth. Sylvia sat in the center of the table, talking, making people laugh, drawing the Duke into every conversation. The Duke answered politely, but his eyes were elsewhere. At one moment, as Rose placed a glass on the table, their eyes met. 1 second. The Duke looked. Rose looked. Then Rose moved on. Dinner ended. The guests withdrew. That night, the servants' quarters were quiet. Everyone was asleep. Rose was not. She sat on her bed, knees drawn up, the brooch in her palm. She thought about the corridor, Sylvia's eyes, Margaret's whisper. Watch that girl. So they had seen her. From the first day, they had seen her. Rose tightened her grip on the brooch. Were her hands shaking? No. They were steady, but inside, something was burning. That quiet, controlled thing she had carried for years. Ashdale blood. Women like Sylvia Croft. Beautiful, calculating, claiming everything, had always existed in Rose's life, in society, in the last years of her father's life, everywhere. And they had always won. Rose lay down. She placed the brooch on her chest. But this time, she thought, this time will be different. She closed her eyes. Stonefield Manor was silent, and Rose slept. A deep, calm, determined sleep. Sylvia stayed at the manor that week, and every day, something happened. Small things. If someone saw only one of them, they might say it meant nothing. But Rose saw them all, because she had grown up around this world, in society, among quiet games and careful moves. She had learned to read them as a child. The first thing happened on Monday. There was a large dinner. The Duke's colleagues, guests from London. The servants would wear formal uniforms. Mrs. Cole entered the room and assigned colors. "You, navy," she told one girl. "You, gray," she told another. Then she turned to Rose. "You, yellow." Rose paused. Yellow. A yellow servant uniform at a formal dinner. Yellow drew attention. People would look. And when people looked at a servant, it wasn't good or bad exactly. It was simply strange. There would be whispers. Rose looked at Mrs. Cole. Mrs. Cole's face was neutral, but her eyes moved away. Sylvia told her, Rose thought, or Margaret. But Mrs. Cole hadn't chosen this herself. She couldn't refuse. "All right," Rose said. That evening she entered the hall wearing the yellow uniform. And it happened. Guests looked. A few whispered. One woman leaned toward her friend, said something, and both of them laughed. Rose held the tray. Walked. Served. Her face did not change. But inside, that burning. Quiet. Controlled. Growing with every minute. At the end of the table, Sylvia sat smiling. That careful smile. The Duke sat at the head of the table. He had noticed something. Rose could feel it. He looked around the room, looked at Sylvia, then looked down again. He said nothing. But as the dinner ended and he stood, he leaned toward Mrs. Cole and whispered something. Rose did not hear it, but she saw it. The next morning, Mrs. Cole came to Rose. "From tonight on, I will choose the uniforms," she said. "I will tell you personally." She said nothing else and left. Rose understood. The Duke had intervened, not openly, quietly, but he had. The second thing happened on Wednesday. A large group of guests arrived from London, 8 people staying for 3 days. The manor fell into chaos. Everyone's work doubled, and Rose received a special task, cleaning every guest room, early in the morning and late in the evening. Sheets, curtains, carpets, alone. The other servants shared their work. Rose did not. When Mrs. Cole announced it, the girl beside Rose muttered, "That's too much for one person. Rose can handle it," Mrs. Cole said. She didn't leave. She waited. Rose lifted her head and looked into Mrs. Cole's eyes. There was something in them, something like an apology, but she could not say it. "All right," Rose said. For 3 days, Rose woke at 5. She cleaned 8 rooms, carried trays, prepared the rooms again in the evening. She was on her feet until 11 at night. She was tired. Of course she was. But she did not fall. On the 3rd evening, another servant girl came to her. She held a cup of tea. "Here," she said quietly. "You earned it." Rose took it. Thanked her. That night, holding the brooch in her palm, she thought, "People see. Not everyone." but some do. The third thing happened on Friday evening. It was the worst. During dinner, Lady Margaret spoke. The guests were still there. A long table, many people, constant conversation. Rose was serving. Margaret spoke from the center of the table, her voice rising. "Rose!" Everyone turned. Rose turned as well. "Come here." Rose stepped forward, holding the tray. Margaret looked at her, for a long moment, in front of everyone. "You placed the silverware incorrectly," she said. Rose looked at the table. The silverware was correct. Everything was correct. She had sat at tables like this for years. She knew. "I apologize, Your Ladyship," Rose said calmly. "An apology is not enough." Margaret turned to the guests. "These new servants," she shook her head. "I don't know where they find them." A few people laughed politely. Society laughter. Rose stood still. Inside her, the burning had become a flame, but on her face there was nothing. "Shall I fix it, Your Ladyship?" she asked. Margaret hesitated. She had not expected that answer. She had expected shame, apologies, a trembling voice. "Fix it," she said coldly. Rose reached for the silverware. Before touching it, she paused for a moment. Everyone was watching. Then she lifted each piece and set it down again. Slowly, carefully. They had already been in the correct place, but Rose removed them and placed them back exactly where they were. When she finished, she turned. "Your Ladyship." She bowed her head and stepped back. Silence. One of the guests, an elderly gentleman, cleared his throat. He changed the subject. Dinner Maria continued. Sylvia had watched that scene. She was not smiling. She was calculating. She isn't breaking, she thought. Why isn't she breaking? Margaret leaned toward her and whispered, "It will require something different." Sylvia lowered her head. "I know." Charles had watched that scene too, from the head of the table. He had heard his mother's words. He had heard the laughter, and he had seen Rose standing there, straight, calm, untouched on the surface. When dinner ended, he stood and stepped into the corridor. Rose was on her way to the kitchen. Charles stopped. "Rose?" Rose turned. "You did well this evening," Charles said. He said nothing more. Then he walked away. 2 sentences, short, simple. But in that corridor, on that evening, those 2 sentences meant the world to Rose. Late that night, Rose sat on her bed. She took out the brooch. That burning was still inside her. It had not faded. It would not fade, because it was real. The pain was real. The anger was real. But there was something else too. Those 2 sentences. "You did well this evening." Rose closed her hand around the brooch. Ashdale blood, she thought. No one can take that from me. Not Sylvia, not Margaret. No one. She lay down, closed her eyes. Stonefield Manor was silent, and Rose slept. That week, Sylvia made a decision. The small games were not working. The yellow dress had failed. The heavy workload had failed. Margaret's little scene at dinner had failed. Rose was not breaking. So something else was needed. It was Saturday afternoon. The great hall was full. Margaret's tea gathering, women from society, visitors from London, neighbors from nearby estates. 15, maybe 20 people. The Duke was standing in one corner, out of obligation. He disliked gatherings like this, but at his mother's events, he was expected to make an appearance. Rose was serving. A tray, glasses, moving back and forth, as always. Sylvia stood at the center of the room. She was talking. Cheerful, polished, drawing of everyone's attention. This was what she did best. She filled a room. Then she stopped. Rose was passing right beside her. Sylvia turned and looked at her. "Ah, this is Rose," she said loudly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I was wondering, may I ask something?" Rose stopped, holding the tray. "Yes, ma'am," Sylvia smiled. "Last week, a brooch went missing from one of the guest rooms. Silver. Small. You cleaned those rooms, didn't you?" The room went quiet. Rose froze. A brooch. A silver brooch. They know about the brooch. No, they didn't. Sylvia was inventing it. Maybe she had seen Rose's brooch. Maybe she was making the whole thing up. It didn't matter, because 15 people were looking at her now. "No, ma'am," Rose said evenly. "I did not see a brooch." "Are you sure?" Sylvia did not lower her voice. "Because you were the only one who cleaned that room, and the brooch disappeared after that day." Silence. One woman whispered. Someone else turned to look more closely. Rose felt something deeper than the burning inside her. Older, heavier, the familiar weight of humiliation. "They are calling me a thief. They are calling a servant a thief." She was about to answer. She didn't know what she would say, but she would have said something. Then a voice cut across the room. "Enough!" Everyone turned. Charles Vey was on his feet. He had risen from his chair in the corner and spoken that one word. He had not raised his voice. He had not shouted. But he filled the room. He looked at Sylvia. Straight. Cold. Final. "Enough," he said again. Sylvia froze. Margaret froze. Everyone froze. "You are a guest in this house," Charles said flatly. "And I will not allow unsupported accusations against the people who work here." Sylvia was recovering now. "Charles, I heard what you said." Silence. Complete silence. Sylvia's face flushed. Margaret's jaw tightened. The guests looked at their cups, at their plates, as though the most fascinating tea in the world had suddenly appeared in front of them. Rose was still holding the tray. Were her hands shaking? They were, but the tray did not show it. Charles turned. He looked at Rose. "Are you all right?" 2 words. Simple. Brief. It might have sounded like an ordinary question. But in that room, in front of those people, for the Duke to turn to a servant and ask, "Are you all right?" That was not ordinary. Rose waited for 1 second. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." Charles inclined his head and returned to his place. The tea gathering ended early. The guests left quickly, with that awkward kind of hurry. People try to hide. The whispers began at the door. They continued outside. Sylvia went to Margaret. The 2 of them spoke in low voices. Rose did not hear them, but she could feel it. She carried the tray into the kitchen, closed the door, leaned against the wall, closed her eyes. 10 seconds. Just 10 seconds. Then she opened them again, turned back to the tray, and began washing. Late that evening, she heard a sound, in the corridor, from the direction of the library. Rose was passing by. She was on her way upstairs. But the door was slightly open. Light spilled through the gap. She stopped. She should have kept walking. She didn't. She pushed the door a little farther. Charles was standing beside the table, looking toward the window. When he heard her, he turned. "I'm sorry," Rose said. "I didn't mean to disturb you. Come in." Rose stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She remained standing. Charles looked at her for a second. Then he sat down in a chair and gestured to the one across from him. Rose sat. A servant did not sit in the Duke's library, across from the Duke. But she did. "I'm sorry about this evening," Charles said. Rose was surprised. "You are apologizing?" "It happened in my house. You didn't do it." "I didn't stop it sooner." He paused. "I should have." Rose said nothing. Charles looked at her. How long has this been going on? Since the first day. I knew. His voice lowered, but I did not interfere. That was wrong. Rose kept her hands folded in her lap. She was sitting straight. She always sat straight, without even realizing it. Why did you interfere today? She asked. Charles thought for a moment. Because this time it was open. Theft. An accusation without proof. In front of everyone. He paused. I could not let that pass. Rose lowered her head slightly. There was a silence. Then Charles asked, Where are you really from? Rose froze. There it was. That question. She wanted to answer. She wanted to give him the real answer. Ashdale. Her father. That house. That life. But she couldn't. Because once she said it, everything would change. And once everything changed, what then? The way he looked at her would change. There might be pity in it. Or suspicion. She wanted neither. London, she said. From a difficult past. Charles looked at her with those tired eyes that seemed to see everything. We all have a difficult past, he said. Rose looked back at him. You too? He paused for a second. He had not expected that question. Me too, he said. Silence. But this was a different silence. Not the empty silence of those first days. This one was full. It belonged to both of them. Rose stood up. It's late, she said. Good night. Charles inclined his head. Good night. Rose walked to the door. Rose. She turned. Starting tomorrow, don't leave the matter of your uniforms to Mrs. Cole, Charles said. Tell me directly if there is a problem. Rose looked at him. All right, she said. She went up to her room, sat down on the bed, took out the brooch. She thought about the hall. Sylvia's voice. Margaret's frozen face. The way the guests stared down at their plates. And those two words. Are you all right? And the silence in the library. We all have a difficult past. Rose closed her hand around the brooch. That burning was still there inside her. It had not faded. It would not. But over it, something very new, very fragile, something she did not want to name yet. There was something else, too. She did not name it. Not yet. She lay down and closed her eyes. Sylvia spent a week preparing. It was a quiet week. After the disaster at the tea gathering, Sylvia had barely been seen. She stayed in her room, spoke with Margaret, wrote letters. Rose felt it. That silence was dangerous. More dangerous than noise. She is planning something, Rose thought. She is waiting. But Rose could not guess what Sylvia might do. The grand dinner was on Friday evening. It was Charles's circle. Names from Parliament, important families from London. 12 people at the table. One of the largest dinners the manor had hosted. Rose got ready. She would be serving with the other maids. Sylvia came downstairs early that evening. Red dress, perfect hair, every detail carefully planned. Margaret was beside her, dark purple, hard-faced, ready. Rose saw them. Something tightened inside her. Tonight, she thought. Something will happen. Tonight, dinner began. The first half hour passed without trouble. Conversation, wine, service. Rose moved back and forth. Calm, steady. Everything normal. Charles sat at the head of the table. He was speaking. Not much, but when he spoke, people listened. Rose had always been struck by that. The way this man could say so little and still hold the room. Sylvia sat in the middle of the table. She was shining. Everyone was looking at her. Then dessert was served, and Sylvia spoke. You know, Sylvia said. Her voice was light, almost playful, as if she were about to tell an amusing story. I learned something very interesting this week. A few people turned toward her. When Sylvia began like that, it usually meant good gossip was coming. "There is a secret in this manor," she said. She paused, waiting for the effect. "About one of the servants." Rose was standing near the corner, holding a tray. She froze. Sylvia went on. "Her name is Rose, the new maid." She looked around the table. "But she is not really a maid." Silence. A few heads turned toward Rose. "She is from the Ashdale family." Sylvia's voice was sweet. She always hid the poison inside sweetness. "Once a known family, but the father went bankrupt. They lost everything. And this woman," she paused, "changed her name and entered this house as a servant." Another pause. "She deceived you." The room went quiet, completely quiet. Everyone was looking at Rose. Rose stood still, holding the tray, back straight, face calm. Inside, what did she feel? Everything. Everything at once. Shame? A little, but beneath the shame was something else, that old familiar weight. The Ashdale name had become a burden. It had been that way ever since her father. Anger? Yes, not only at Sylvia, at everyone who played this kind of game. She had known people like that all her life, people who saw another person's fall as an opportunity. And something else, too. Fear. Small. Quiet. What happens now? She was about to speak. She opened her mouth. Then Charles spoke first. "The Ashdale family?" It was Charles's voice, from the head of the table. Calm, even, almost as though he were simply asking a question. Everyone turned. Charles was not looking at Rose. He was looking at Sylvia. "Ashdale," he said again, as if testing the name. "An old family." He paused. "Her father was an honorable man. I knew him for years." Silence. Sylvia's face changed. Only slightly, but it changed. "Charles." "Debt can happen to anyone," Charles said. His voice was flat. He was not defending, not judging. He was simply stating a fact. "Ashdale's debt is not a disgrace. It is misfortune." Someone at the table cleared his throat. Someone else raised a glass of wine. "And as for changing her name," Charles now looked at the table, at everyone. "For someone from a fallen family, that is a difficult choice, but an understandable one." The weapon Sylvia had prepared so carefully, the weapon she had spent a week waiting to use, had failed. The Duke had turned it into a shield. Margaret was frozen. Her glass had stopped halfway in the air. Her face had gone pale. Sylvia was trying to recover. You could see it, see her working for it. But she couldn't. She began. "I know what you were trying to do," Charles said. Silence. Those two sentences were enough. Everyone understood. They understood without anything more needing to be said. Sylvia said nothing after that. Dinner continued. But it had changed. The conversations were different. The voices were different. Sylvia was no longer glowing. She had faded. She looked smaller now, sitting in her place. Margaret did not speak a single word. Rose went on serving, back and forth, holding the tray. But something had shifted inside her. That tightness, that weight she had carried for years, ever since her father, had lifted. Just a little. An old family. Her father was an honorable man. No one had ever said that to her before. No one. Dinner ended. The guests left. The manor emptied. Rose was in the kitchen, collecting the last of the plates. She was alone. The door opened. Charles stepped in. Rose turned, surprised. A duke did not come into the kitchen. He stopped and looked at her. "I knew," he said. Rose waited. I knew who you were. I knew from the first week." He paused. "The way you stand, the way you speak, your hands." He glanced toward the window. "The Ashdale family was known in London. I had seen your father. At meetings, once or twice." Rose said nothing. "I did not ask," Charles said, "because it was not my right to ask. You came here for work. Your past belongs to you." Silence. Rose closed her eyes. In that darkness, she saw her father, in his last days, ill, tired. "Rose, our name is a burden now. Don't carry it." That was what he had said, and Rose had not carried it. She had changed it. But now that room was full again in her mind. That table. And the Duke saying an old family, saying her father was an honorable man. She opened her eyes. They were full. Not overflowing. Not quite. But full. "Thank you," she said softly. Charles inclined his head. He turned to leave. "Lord Vay." He stopped. "My father," Rose said, and her voice trembled, only slightly. "He was a good man. Only unlucky." Charles turned and looked at her. "I know," he said. That night, Rose went up to her room. She did not sit on the bed. She went to the window. Outside was darkness. The garden was silent. Far away, the hills lay under the mist. She took out the brooch, held it in her palm. This time it felt different. She had always held it to stay anchored, to remember, to remind herself not to forget who she was. But tonight was different. Tonight it felt as though she no longer had to hold on so tightly, because someone had said it, out loud, in front of everyone. An old family. Her father was an honorable man. Rose placed the brooch on the windowsill and let go. Sylvia left the next morning, without telling anyone. The trunks were packed, the carriage was called, the door closed. Rose saw it from the kitchen window. The carriage, the luggage, Sylvia's red coat. Then the carriage rolled away, and she was gone. Margaret stayed one more day. That day she crossed paths with Rose in the corridor. They were alone. Margaret stopped. Rose stopped. Margaret said nothing. She only looked. That measuring, calculating look. The look that always seemed to weigh and assess everything. Rose waited. Then Margaret walked past without a word. The next morning, she left too. The manor breathed again. The servants felt it. The sounds in the kitchen changed. Easier now, more natural. Even Mrs. Cole softened a little. Rose did her work that day, as always. Rooms, trays, corridors. But something was different. The maid who had once brought her tea, the one who had always been kind to her, came over to her at midday. "We heard," she said quietly. "Ashdale, so that's who you are." Rose looked at her. "Yes," she said. The girl lowered her head, but there was something in her expression. Respect, perhaps, or understanding. Maybe both. "You were always different," she said. "We knew that already." News spread through London quickly. Society had always been like that. One dinner, 15 guests, and by the next morning, everyone knew. Whispers moved through the city. Rose heard them from the servants piece by piece. "She's the Ashdale daughter, fallen, but from an old family." The Duke stood up to Sylvia in front of everyone. "We've never seen him like that. He knew her father, said he was an honorable man. So that's the truth. What did Rose feel when she heard those whispers? It wasn't victory, not exactly. It was something quieter, something deeper. It's over, she thought. This game is over. That afternoon she went into the garden. The air was cold but clear. It was late December. Snow had not yet fallen, but it was coming. You could feel it in the air. Rose walked to the far end of the garden, near the trees, and stopped. She closed her eyes. She thought about her father, that house, that life. Then the last days, the debts, the furniture being sold, the empty rooms, and now this place, this garden, this manor. What a journey, she thought. She heard footsteps. Charles was walking toward her. He wore his coat and held his gloves in one hand. He had come out into the garden and seen her there. He stopped beside her. They both looked out over the garden in silence. Then Charles spoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rose knew what he meant, who she was. Ashdale. She thought for a moment. She wanted to give the real answer. "Because I didn't want to prove who I was," she said. "I wanted to become someone." Charles turned and looked at her. "What do you mean?" Rose turned as well. "If I had arrived as the Ashdale daughter," she said, "everyone would have seen me that way. A fallen noblewoman, someone to pity, or someone to suspect." She paused. "I came here. I worked. I earned everything with my own hands. And before anyone saw me as Ashdale, they saw me as Rose." She paused again. "That mattered to me." Silence. Charles looked at her for a long time. "You did," he said. Rose frowned slightly. "Did what?" "You became Rose," Charles said. His voice was calm, but what he meant was not simple. "Just Rose, not Ashdale, not fallen, not someone to pity." He paused. "For 3 months in this house, I have seen who you are, whatever name you carry." Rose could not speak. Something was in her throat. She remembered those nights holding the brooch in her hand. The burning. The nights she had told herself that no one could take Ashdale blood from her. No one had. But now it felt as if she no longer had to hold it so tightly, because she already carried it, inside her. Without the brooch, without the name. "There's something I want to ask you," Charles said. Rose waited. For a moment he hesitated. The man who always measured every word carefully. This time, he was not measuring. He was simply speaking. "Would you like to stay here?" Rose froze. "As a servant?" she asked. "No." Silence. A long silence. One that belonged to both of them. The wind moved through the garden trees. Rose looked at him. Those tired, sincere eyes, now a little more open than before. "Why are you asking me that?" she said. "Because," Charles answered, "when you stand in this garden, you look like you belong to this house." Rose waited for a second. "I feel that way too," she said. Winter passed. In spring, London heard the news. The Duke of Stonefield was getting married. To whom? A daughter of the Ashdale family. Fallen, but from an old line. She had once worked in the Duke's household. The Duke had chosen her. Society whispered, of course. It always whispered. But this time, Rose did not hear it, because she no longer cared. On the morning of the wedding, Rose stepped through that door. The same door. Not the back gate of Stonefield Manor this time. The front entrance. Large, wide, open to the sunlight. Her back was straight. It had always been straight. But this morning she was not alone. Charles stopped, turned toward her, and looked at her. "Are you ready?" Rose smiled. A small smile. A real one. Completely her own. "I have always been ready," she said. And they walked forward. She had entered that house as a servant, her back straight, and she left that house as a duchess. Her back was still straight. But this time, someone was beside her. Thank you for listening to the story, all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.